Hello, hello. What is up? Another amazing, blessed day. You know what it is. I'm your host, your founder of Break Into the Future. We're breaking in, breaking gang. This is Joshua Taylor. I have the amazing, the illustrious Jeff Booth. What is up? How are you doing?
Hey, hey, great to see you, Joshua. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you as well. I'm not crushing right now, but I have read your amazing book, The Price of Tomorrow, in 2 days. Shout out to Greg Foss. You got me this interview, but definitely just want to have fun today. The people always want to know who our guests are. So just tell a quick intro of yourself, who you are, whatever you want to say, and then we'll just have a great discussion.
Probably the easiest way. I'm an entrepreneur, built a number of different technology companies today, sit on boards of about 8 different technology companies, and investor in a bunch of as well. So just seeing the path in technology and that disruption. And then I wrote a book called The Price of Tomorrow, Why Deflation's Key to an Abundant Future. I really wrote that because I felt the missing piece. There was a missing puzzle piece that wasn't going together, or that people weren't seeing on what technology could do versus how our systems were wired. And I worried about the future my kids would grow up into if something wasn't done about that system problem. So that's what the book explores.
Trying to save us from our own demise.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that book in more people's hands. But want to go back on your background, big bro. So you said that you founded tons of tech companies. How did that happen? How did you get to that point?
Yeah. So I've always been curious, and when you're curious and you understand and you can understand technology, or how you could use technology to create better systems or a better company or to help people,
Hmm.
um, you try to learn more about that. And I'd say, so how did that happen? I used to think it was because I read 50 books a year, and I'm just a voracious reader. I'm just curious about things. When things don't make sense to me, I want to learn more, and I want to chase that to the ground. And I want to learn everything about the subject
Hmm.
so it makes sense to me. So that's just part of who I am.
Hmm.
And I used to think that there was a curiosity that drove the success. And what I've learned about myself is actually probably not. It's actually probably the accountability that I have limited time in my life, and most of my life is really how I determine it looks like.
Hmm.
So I could blame other people, be in like, or I could take accountability. But by taking accountability, it forces you, if you don't like something, if you're doing something wrong, instead of keep doing it wrong, it forces you to have curiosity to fix that problem. So it's probably the accountability that drove the curiosity, and then the curiosity that drove a bunch of the success.
Yeah, that's real. You're teaching us, and we want to educate people here. I'm learning right now, but it makes sense from a simplistic standpoint. But execution probably a little bit harder for
Well,
them.
I would say in this, and this we won't cover deeply in the podcast, but just think about the number of people you know
Hmm.
that keep on doing the exact same thing in their life,
Yeah,
and they blame an exterior problem
yeah.
to what you can see really clearly
Mhm.
is themselves creating that outcome for themselves in their lives, and we can see it in everyone else really easily. And so that should tell you something. It should tell you, if you can see that in everybody else,
Mhm.
it's probably in you too.
Mhm.
And what I realized is those same things were in me too. And so, but it's easy to let our ego tell us one thing, because it's way easier to believe it's someone else's fault than our own.
Mhm.
But when we do that, we create ourselves as a victim, and
Mhm.
we don't change.
Yeah,
But it's easy. But it's easier. It's easier to believe that.
yeah. And to fall into this not just victimhood, but you're living a fantasy. You're living a mirage of thinking you're always right.
Yeah, a trap, and that prevents you from learning the things that you should learn to be able to change your outcomes.
Yeah.
And so probably fundamentally,
Mhm.
any success, and I'm not talking monetary success alone. I'm talking family success, friend success, just spending my time exactly how I want to.
Yeah.
It comes from that.
So a holistic life, not just
Exactly.
you're great in one area, but the rest of your life
Yeah,
sucks.
it's disintegrating.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, that happens to. Why do you think that happens to a lot of us?
It's the same. It's the same reason. So, and I'll use an archetype in this. So when I use that victim archetype, we can see. So what does a victim really want? Right. So they have a sign on their forehead
Crying
that
for help.
it's a cry for help. They want to be loved.
Yeah.
They want to belong.
Hmm.
And what they don't realize is by trying to get love through being a victim,
Hmm.
they're pushing away the love and belonging they want most. Because as they burn out friends and everything else, what they typically do is double down and create more drama
Hmm.
to blame other people to be able to stay there. And it's a reinforcement cycle. And what ends up happening is early on, if they used victim to be able to get love and belonging, it worked. Everybody raced to them.
Hmm.
And then it stops working. By the way, and why people disintegrate their lives in places is actually that same thing. It's really easy to see in somebody else. You could say people are walking around with signs on their forehead pointed outwards, and you can read what's on their sign, but they can't read it.
Yeah.
And we very rarely tell them what's on their sign to be able to help them. We tell everybody else what's on their sign, but we won't tell them, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But now if you play that same thing on that victim, and that, like, it's easy to see in the victim, but it's the exact same thing happens for somebody that's chasing money at all costs.
Hmm.
And what they're telling themselves is a lot often is I'm doing it all for my family,
Mm.
but they never see their family.
Yeah.
Again, they're pushing away the thing they want most with the thing that they're trying to get love and belonging through. So that people don't need, once you have a certain amount of money, you don't need a whole bunch more money. You're doing it for the same reason, because you think it gives you value.
Yeah. That drug.
And that drug that other people will look at you in a better way to be able to be able to change your life. And it's a drug just like the victim drug. And so it's that notion, when I see things that are in everybody, in everybody else, I assume my brain is wired the same way. I assume that it must be in me too, and I work to try to fix those things, or try to at least be aware of them, so I can bring them, so I can work on them.
Yeah. I love this already. So awesome. So we could literally go down this psychological, we could have like a therapy session, but we could actually spin it into your book and how you had this cool success and you were tech beast and you took companies public and you're just like Canadian beast, a good beast. But I think it's like, okay, you're successful, you have family, you have a lot of these different areas covered, right? Maybe you're figuring out, hey, how do I become this whole person? And you're learning as you're growing your life, and then you stop and you say, wait, there's a bigger systemic issue around the world, or the whole world, the Western world that you're in, that's chasing this money trap, right? This cap table of debt, which is just, hey, the servers borrowing, the borrower server to the lender, and then equity, which for the audience is just ownership. I own some type of asset, whether that's a digital or physical asset. There's some type of trap that we've gotten into with these debt cycles, with the economy. There's haves and have nots. Something is wrong. What Talk about that, and when did your brain say, hey, there's a problem, I want to fix it, I'm curious, I'm going all the way in?
So that happened over a long time. It probably happened over 10 years cycle. And here's the thing I couldn't understand. And I just kept on getting more and more curious about it. If you had talked to my friends, they would be tired of hearing this conversation a long time ago. And so that's and so what I became curious about is technology is moving so fast. It's moving exponentially fast. And exponential patterns are really hard to grasp for human beings. And people think that because they hear a parlor trick, like if I fold a piece of paper on itself 50 times, if I could fold it 50 times, that piece of paper would reach the sun. I can only fold it 7. But now when people go, no way, a thin 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on itself, your audience will go look on Google to see if that's correct. And it's correct. And now they'll think they know the trick. But we don't, we'll make the mistake on the next exponential pattern. But technology is moving at that rate. And the same thing that we misunderstand early on in technology, on the first fold of a piece of paper, it's a really thin line and it feels like nothing happened. And the second fold is really thin. It doesn't feel like anything happened. Third fold. And about 6 folds later, it's an inch. And so, and it's no way, it is so hard to comprehend that on 50 folds that could reach the sun. But that's the same thing as moving on technology. Technology is moving at that exponential pattern. And we're on fold 34, moving to fold 35. So the same thing that tricks our mind in the beginning, where we get hyped up about what technology can bring, and then it doesn't, and it fails expectations because it's on the first fold. And we have this hype cycle in technology. It keeps on doubling. And then later on, as much as it tricked us the other way, it dramatically tricks us going the other way. So it has exponential. And so what does technology do now? So that's how fast it's moving. Now, what does it do? Technology brings productivity to our lives. It gives us more for less. And so what I couldn't understand is how we could live in a world where technology was becoming a base layer of everything. It was moving into every industry at blinding speed, giving us more for less. Yet we had constructed the world the exact opposite on an inflationary monetary system that has to give us less for more.
And why is that? Why did that happen? And why does that still exist today?
So it's designed by humans. And by the way, some of the psychology in this has to be understood at the level that we're talking about, the kind of that same level of why is something designed some way. So inflation. So first, think about this: every rational human being is voting with their time to get more for less. That's the way the free market works. You wouldn't use Google. We wouldn't use Zoom right now for this recording, which is free, right? We wouldn't use that unless we were voting to save our time and money. So that's what we're doing with every single company we make a monopoly, including Amazon, Google, and all the others. We're voting to get more for less. Yet somehow we believe that in the when you layer that up, it should work the opposite way and we should get less for more. So now if you to ask the question, why is that? The simple answer is this: because inflation is a tax that people don't see, governments can spend more than they make in tax revenue and hide that tax. But that tax penalizes parts of the community, and it incentives part of the community. So you can build a credit-based system that essentially has to grow forever and hide most of that tax in inflation. So people, because they don't want to vote for higher taxes, but if you hide the tax, essentially you're voting for higher taxes, but it's the most misused tax around. It's punitive to certain parts of the population, and when you think about it, if you own assets, those assets rise because of that tax. So housing and real estate, stocks and everything else, those assets rise with inflation. But the other side of the coin of inflation is wage deflation. So your wages go down in real terms, and your savings go down in real terms. So you have this system that builds more and more inflation, more and more tax. Which a good way to see this is just through the game of Monopoly. Now imagine you go around exactly right behind you. Perfect. You go around the board, and if you look at racism and everything else, it's actually tied into that same board, and it's endemic in the system. So you go around that board, and if you were lucky enough to go around that board and you land on the right squares early on in the game, you have a feedback system that reinforces on itself, and it looks like you're getting more and more luck.
Yeah.
Because now your rents go up on your houses, and but the opposite side of that, that's going around that board, is somebody else has negative luck going around the board, and the same reinforcement pattern as they go around the board, getting harder and harder for them to pay the bills until somebody wins the game.
Yeah.
So now if you had an economy structured around that luck and timing, that people who had to go around the board over and over and over again, and their kids couldn't get into the right schools, and it's getting further and further away, and the game could never reset because the bank kept on changing money and giving more and more to the rich, and the poor were forever destitute, and you couldn't reset the game. How long would the poor go around the game without burning the game down? And so what you're finding today in society, because of that inflationary monetary system that gives more and more privilege to those who have assets and wealth and everything else, and does so by taking away from others.
Yeah. Zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game. But I will tell you this. The people at the top, very few of them know that they're privileged out of this game. They think it's because of their smarts, and very few at the bottom realize that they're penalized because of the game. It's a system problem, and it's not bad people, it's a bad system. So, but that is the way the system is wired. And if you just think about it from a logic-based standpoint, why is it that we believe, to run a productive society, that our money must be worth less each year? Does that make any logical sense?
But people know that, though.
Yeah, but again, that's what inflation is.
Yeah.
Inflation. A better way to look at inflation is it's Robin Hood in reverse. It's a theft of middle and lower class people's time, energy, and everything else, and it steals that money, and it puts it into either wealthy or power in government, more power in government. And so, but it's a theft. And does it matter if you have a theft encoded in base money, then you can expect that theft to continue and to have a whole bunch of misinformation and money, which translates to misinformation everywhere. So we're going through a crazy time in the world right now, where these two systems are driving together. You have a deflationary system that, because technology gives you more for less, and it gets exponentially so your life should be getting better and better as you work less and less. You should have more time. But it's incongruent. It cannot work with an inflationary monetary system that's trying to do the exact opposite. So if you just imagine these two curves, these two feedback systems, they're working in exactly opposite directions. So the more the governments try to push up prices, the faster companies need to automate with technology to remove labor, which causes the governments to have to push up prices. And so you have the world, everyone, caught in this make-believe price world.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel make-believe if you can't pay your rent and you can't pay your for food. It's not make-believe at all. It's very real. So when you have that, rational actors in an economy, being us people that can't do that anymore, start to look for, either the first step is, where can I escape this crushing devaluation? And they take gambles with their money. And so essentially money just becomes like a lottery ticket, and you're trying to escape this. So that's kind of what happens first. But when they can't escape this, they rise up. And and typically what they do first they rise up and they vote for leaders who will do the exact same thing but say that it's not, they'll solve it by taxing the rich. But most of the revenue comes through inflation. So you have a system problem, and you can't solve a system problem with different people in the same system.
Yeah.
So this isn't a political, and nothing I say is political at all, because whether Democrats, Republicans, and everything else, yet most people, 99% of people, think it can be solved from that.
Yeah. Why are we hidden? Why do we go to the wrong solution? If political solution is wrong, is not the best way to solve it, why do we not explore something else?
Because it's really hard, Joshua, to imagine when you're so imagine I can just empathize. I can empathize with somebody who lives in poverty, who's always renting. It's getting harder and harder for them to pay their bills. They're working 2 jobs. Their kids are living in that. They can't get out of that. I can empathize with what it might look like for them. By the way, whether it's in a country or a different country that it's worse, because the same thing happens all over the world. I can empathize with what I might feel, how I might see the world. And the way I see the world through my privilege of being able to see in systems, my curiosity, everything else, is totally different than somebody else that was punished there could even possibly see the world, because they're worried about feeding their family. They're worried about different things. So, but I understand how it could look like that. So why don't people see it? Because they don't have time to see it. They're worried about survival.
Yeah.
And why do they get mad? Why do they blame other people? Because they're worried about survival and everything else. And why that becomes a hotbed for society to go through is because of that. Now, but even if you saw it, even if the government saw that, or 10 governments saw that, what would they do? Because here is the truth, an unfortunate truth. By the way, there's lots of opportunity on here. I'm very hopeful, but this is the unfortunate truth of a system change that must move from one system to another system. Winter is coming. It's going to be really ugly, and that's going to hurt a lot of people. And I wish that didn't, but one way or another, winter is coming, and it's going to get. And if you're on the right side of that, then you can do really well. But if you're on the wrong side of it, you'll get crushed.
What is winter? If you could explain that to the people.
Well, so technology is not going to be stopped. So technology is going to speed up. Same thing we talked about on exponential patterns. And what that should be doing for you is giving you more for less always. But what that is it's deflationary. What that means by deflationary is your money should be worth more every year. As it buys more things, gives you more free time, everything else. That's a system we should be living in. But if you actually allow that system to happen, that deflationary system to happen against an inflationary environment with just credit, the credit gets, you can never pay back the debt. The debt gets more and more expensive in real terms. And so the debt explodes in real value and everything collapses. So what ends up happening, because the debt can't be repaid, every government would fail, every bank would fail, every institution would fail on top of that, and we'd literally be living in a struggle for power in a total. So that it would look like the Great Depression globally on steroids. That's what allowing technology-led deflation now, so late in the cycle, but because they're so trying to stop it, you'd have to go through a debt restructuring, a complete collapse, and then come back on the other side. In a simple way, it's like a business going bankrupt, and everything that the owner of that business, it goes to zero. And then if they start again, they restart a business. But it's our entire system going to zero, restart, and everybody in it. So that's what it looks like. So what you can expect out of why governments are trying so hard to fight what we're talking about, this collision of these two systems, and they're trying to run faster by inflating one system that has all of these negative externalities and divide of wealth. why they're trying to stop it is technology-led deflation is because they don't know what to do to reset the system. There is no reset to the system. It just comes crashing down because there's nothing backing the system. People think, is there gold backing the system, or is like what's backing the system? There's nothing. It's just credit.
Yeah.
And as that credit starts to unwind or become unpayable, what you owe me, Joshua, and I owe somebody else, and they owe somebody else. But now, if you take a nation state levels and banks and everything else, nobody trusts what anybody owes. It all just keeps on unwinding and keeps on unwinding. So you, in that scenario, you would see stock market declines of 90%, 80, 90%. You would see banks nationalize. You would see, it would be such staggering poverty and everything else because there would be no way to pay bills. So you have, but I like to use examples that people can grab their teeth because this sounds really complex. And I like to simplify examples because what's natural in business is the same thing that we're seeing here. In business, what happens if you use Blockbuster as an example? Blockbuster had 9,000 stores, and then Netflix emerged, and a technology emerged that changed the game. Essentially, a technology emerged that made videos, you were able to download a video from what would have taken 2 weeks to immediate, and you could stream videos. And that made overnight Blockbuster's 9,000 stores irrelevant. But what did they do to try to make them relevant? They added candy aisles to their stores because people want to buy popcorn with their movie. Yeah. So and that's a really good example, even though we laugh at it, that example. What a system does to try to protect the system. Yeah. When you have a technology that provides different type of value is pretty predictable. Yeah. And so what you're seeing in all governments globally right now is a predictable response of a system trying to protect itself from something that could be the most positive thing for humanity possible, but by protecting themselves, driving themselves off a cliff faster. The problem is that cliff has all of us in the same car, driving faster off the cliff.
Wow! And so you're in this 10 years process. You said it took you like a decade of learning and just. You're having successes and you're going through the ups and downs of life, and then something clicks like, I want to like be a part of the solution.
Yeah, it wasn't as much like that. It was more of I needed to, so I couldn't understand my first business. It took almost 3 years, 2.5 years, and over $5 million to develop technology that is now available for $50 a month. So I think about the teams of people, the technology people that I have, and that technology is today $50 a month or cheaper, and it's way better technology today than it was 17, 18 years ago. Way better.
Yeah.
For 50. And so when you think about that difference, all of those employees and everything else, I could not understand why we weren't seeing prices declining everywhere. And so I kept on looking and why aren't we seeing this? And then when I realized, okay, today in the world, before COVID, there's $250 trillion of debt in the world. And when you think about $1 trillion, if you paid back $1 a second, it'd take 32,000 years approximately to pay back 1 trillion. Yet there's $250 trillion of debt in the world. So it just boggles your mind with how much debt to run an $80 trillion global economy. So now, now if you think, okay, if you could tax at a different rate and the economy could keep growing really fast, could you ever pay that debt back? Probably the answer is no. The answer is no. But at that time, I was going, okay, is there any possibility? Especially if you add things are becoming information is becoming free, and they don't show up in GDP. Like your photos you use today are free. All of your apps on your phone are free. They don't show up in GDP. They're negative GDP. So you'd have to overcome that technology growth rate with something else that was growing faster to offset. But then I looked, and the smoking gun became, if my thesis was correct and prices were supposed to be coming down, then I should see something over the last 20 years that as technology was making a bigger impact, those bigger steps to the sun, we should see something offsetting that technology gain, that technology productivity and prices coming down. We should see on the opposite side of the ledger something exploding to be able to try to stop it. And then that's when I looked and I realized $185 trillion of the debt, of the $250 trillion of debt, came in the last 20 years. And you went, oh, but because we live in that world, and we measure everything by that world, people get caught up, and my house always goes up in value. When and they never ask, would my house have gone up in value if without $185 trillion of global stimulus? And the answer is simply no. It would have gone down in value. And so so now the only thing to look at in the future is how much longer can 185 trillion or 400 trillion or whatever crazy number keep printing in the future to make houses go up, if you think about that as an asset class. And so as I investigated some of these things and I found these kind of smoking guns, I realized my thesis on technology was correct. And that meant a big deal for humanity. It meant kind of what would be logical for the system to protect itself, and the divide of society that would arise from that happening. If you look at media today, if you look at where most of the conversations are focused, they're focused on something that's two orders away from this root of the problem. Focused on COVID response, they're focused on Trump or Biden, they're focused on all of these things, or Russia or China and everything else. All of these things are what people are focused on, are secondary to what's causing them. So they're not looking deep enough to what's causing all of these things, but they're fighting over each other, creating crazy sides over something that's almost irrelevant. In what really matters.
And what really matters, I guess, in the problem that you were geeking out about for a decade.
So what really matters is we build a society that can thrive and where we're going with technology. Technology gives us more for less. Economics is not about value. Economics is about scarcity. So if you have and people don't realize that, and so people tune out to economics because they feel like somebody else has it, right? And it sounds complicated. Instead of the government saying, we're going to steal your money and make your money worth less each year, they say inflation. Instead of saying, we're going to rewrite the rules of money and just hit a button and print more money and make it up, they say quantitative easing. And with a whole bunch of people that don't understand economics, people don't ask these simple questions. They think, oh, somebody's got it, and they don't look deep enough. But if you just ask yourself really simply, should technology be making my time more efficient? And should that translate into working less because technology removes labor? You would think, yes, that's pretty simple explanation. And then what rate is technology moving? So we live in this other system, and everybody's talking about the other system, not realizing that their measurement, everything is wrong from the other system into what a new system would look like. So I believe that the only way humanity can get to the other side, and again, this normally happens through war and reset. I think the only way that humanity can get to the other side is to enable a digitally native currency that allows for deflation. And out of that, I've done research everywhere. I can't see another option other than Bitcoin. I can't see. So to me, Bitcoin became just like Netflix became a transition path from Blockbuster or photos from Kodak to how we used to develop photos. The technology, Bitcoin specifically, provides a transition path for humanity to move from one system that's inflationary, that will end in peril, to a different system that allows for the abundance gained from technology to be more broadly distributed.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. When did you discover that about Bitcoin and how that was?
So I bought Bitcoin myself in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew about it before. But even in my book, I wrote Bitcoin has a paragraph. It's a very small part, and why is that? Because I actually really wanted to explore: was there any other way?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any possible way to have a change of systems? Can the system change itself? I was hopeful that the system could change itself, but on more and more research and diligence and everything else, and talking to politicians and talking to spoke to the British military for that worried about the same thing, and talking to different people, I realized that the system is not going to change itself. It's impossible. And so then out of all of the technologies that could possibly change a system, what had the highest likelihood to be able to make this transition to a different world where our time is more and more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Why is Bitcoin giving us more for less?
What it does is it enables the free market to do that. So if you think about and there's a whole bunch of this conversation is going to break a whole bunch of people's brains, like my book did and everything else. But if it sits with you and everything else, and you examine what I'm saying is true and really question, could this be true, and everything else, you'll find it is. And so today we believe we live in a free market. And we don't, because I think right now 46% of all the economy in the US and Canada is government spending. And without that 46%, what I said before, you would have a complete collapse. So without government spending, and so now who does government spending make richer? You can see the wealthiest 500 people this year may increase their wealth by $1.8 trillion. 500 people, $1.8 trillion this year in COVID. And so you can see that those responses, no matter what they say, actually concentrates wealth and power faster. Mm-hmm. Because it has to, because it structurally has to, because the wealthy have more assets, they have more things. So it structurally it has to do that.
Yeah.
And so that system, we know, cannot go on forever without concentrating all power, all domain over other humans in a very small number of people's hands.
Imperialism.
Worse, totalitarianism. So think about what it looks like in Russia or China, mm-hmm. To have individual rights and freedoms, mm-hmm. and they can be taken away from you in an instant. Mm-hmm. And if you stand up against that power, look at Navalny in Russia, mm-hmm. you get poisoned. Look at Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia. You get killed and bone sawed and cut up, because that type of power in that type of environment enriches so much power at the top, mm-hmm. that changes the rules for everybody else. So it's not a free. So if you're kind of voting for an electorate that will print money to be able to concentrate more power, no matter how they do it, that's what's happening. And but because so many people are left out of this, of what's happening, there's way less rich people than there are everybody else.
Yeah.
The population will always vote for that. They'll vote for more and more because they don't understand it's a system problem. They're hurting. And they're looking for somebody to step in and try to say, I'll save you. And typically that new leader gains power by blaming somebody else. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what you create is first an internal enemy in your country. And you can see that in the US, you can see this everywhere right now. You can see it along party lines, which people aren't even listening to each other on both sides, because they're both missing the thing driving it all on both sides. Doesn't matter. And so you can see this happening in the States, you can see it happening in Canada, you can see it happening everywhere as people are focused on the wrong thing, but will give more power to the state, no matter who's elected, by doing the same thing. So that leads to totalitarianism, and it leads to and imagine that world with very little labor and all AI and robotics. And imagine if somebody took all of your wealth or money, or said you're no longer welcome here. What would you do? Because once it consolidates like that, it's very dystopian. The opposite side of that is what Bitcoin does. It enables the free market. It's decentralized. Nobody can control it. It can't be. No state. Why states or why China just kicked out Bitcoin miners is because it's incompatible with communism. Because it enables a free market. What does the free market do? The free market, because we all vote with our time, forces price, especially with technology, forces prices down lower and lower and lower and lower. As labor is removed with technology, prices fall as a result. People look at some of the apps on their phones and they think that the app is free because of advertising, and it's not true. The app is free because it's one line of code that nobody ever has to pay for. Look at your flashlight app, look at your compass, look at your everything else. And if a company said, no, I'm going to make tons of margin on my app, there would be a million other people competing to give it cheaper. And so that free market must, again, with a currency that would allow for deflation, that free market must give us more for less along the same axes that technology provides.
Yeah, exactly. Like when Uber and Lyft, all the different ride hailing companies were going at it, Uber just cut their prices so they could win market share across the world.
Totally. And the minute they would push prices up, and why Uber is not a fantastic business as far as a business to invest in, is the same thing. If they raise their price, there'd be a million other people tomorrow that would do it for cheaper. And so then add to that automation is coming in self-driving, and you won't need the driver anymore, and prices can come down a lot more. And all of a sudden you get to this spot where prices, the natural thing in our lives is prices coming down. I use this example often. It's probably important for your audience is too. The oxygen we breathe is free.
Yeah, I remember that in the book.
Yeah. Why is that? If it's the most valuable thing in our life, why is it free? And from that, we can see the thing we believe in economic system isn't true. Abundance, anything that's abundant, turns to free. And what's happening in technology is creating more and more abundance everywhere, and the prices should be falling as a result.
Yeah.
If you look at photography, how many photos do you take now versus what you did 15 years ago? The iPhone was only invented 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we take for granted all of these things that have become free and abundant, billions of photos and everything else, all for free. Whereas before, the huge cost, distribution channel, jobs, everything else to take a limited number of photos, that then we would go, oh, only 2 of them worked.
Yeah, and the rest are dark. Can't see.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, loving the book, like how in season 1 of Breaking the Future, we are focused on crypto and blockchain, but I think that why Breaking to the Future is about all things future. And you say in your book, and we could talk about this, is like it is about technology transcending our world to where it doesn't have to be this evil, dystopian, it's going to take over us. It really is tech enabled, right? Tech enables humans to do more of what we were created to do, which is to create, build things, like to use our brains to like do things in the world, not to like do these random jobs that we don't even like.
So zooming out and building onto that, every single thing around our lives, including the way our lives are wired, are an invention of the human mind.
Facts.
Right. The system is an invention of people, human mind. If we want a different invention, then we can invent a different system that provides better outcomes from the same thing. That's why I wrote the book. All of our products are inventions of the human mind. And typically what ends up happening is an entrepreneur sees, why are we doing it that way?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That doesn't make any sense. And they go to where no one is going.
Yeah.
Right. And they build for the future, and they build for, and if they're right, a whole bunch of people are impacted positively, and that use that goods or services, or the way that we wired the world and everything else, because it provided a better outcome.
Yeah.
If we're actually talking about my book and that in relation to that, or the businesses that I think that I'm involved in,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I do. And what I realize is, my businesses that I'm involved in and doing, I would never be part of a business that was actually trying to not help people. I just wouldn't. I don't need to. So every single business is empowered by technology to help people and create a better future.
Yeah.
And when I saw that adding up and saying, okay, well, why isn't it doing it at the rate it should be doing it? Or why is the system not changing at the rate? I realized that the same thing was happening at a meta level, because we were caught in an old system. So maybe it just took an entrepreneur's mind to look at a system problem differently. But we can invent any future we want.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything we experience is from the human mind.
Yeah. True. We're the creators. What would you, if the future could look any way, in your book, go read the book and buy it, what would the future look like to you? What do you see it as, and with the companies you invest in and the work you're doing today?
So I need to qualify this. When I said winter is coming and what's going to happen,
Yeah.
it's gonna the next while, because of the system change,
Mm-hmm.
might be pretty ugly. And my hope is we can transition peacefully to this new reality. The more people have that, I would suggest in that, if I'm right, people should do their own work and everything else and question this too.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm right in this thesis, and if I'm right about Bitcoin, it would serve you well to really learn it and get some, whether you're putting $50 and $100 and $50 a week in, something to get off zero, to be able to understand how important this is. Because today, you don't have an asymmetric bet. By the way, Amazon in 2001 went from $120 to $5, and everybody thought it was over. And now it's what, $2,700.
Yeah.
So so you don't have an asymmetric bet with unlimited upside,
Mm-hmm.
without volatility along the way,
Mm-hmm.
and without most people on the planet misunderstanding that asymmetric bet.
Mm-hmm.
Because you couldn't get that value gain if everybody understood it.
Yeah.
It would already be a different value. So that's how early we are with Bitcoin, in my belief. I believe it's that asymmetric bet, and it could save people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it could, and the more people that are on it, the easier the transition is to the future. In the future that I see, we build a world where the technology empowers us to save time. We build a world that where we value each. So I find it crazy that we work for 40 years of our life that could be eradicated with a keystroke. Somebody else's choice destroys 40 years of our wealth by pressing a button and making up new money. I find it ludicrous that we all vote for a system like that. And so in a different system that it makes that impossible, that takes the power away from people to have that domain over us, and puts that power into code with fair rules and decentralized, I see I see us moving to more harmony. I don't believe in dystopia. I don't believe in utopia. You saw that in the book, unilaterally, but I believe in systems that provide fairness and equality. And when I say equality, I don't mean everybody makes the same money. If you provide more value to society, as voted for by society, you should make more money than I make. And at any certain time in any given market. So today, AI researchers make a lot of money. In time, they might not make a bunch of money. It might be taken by somebody else. So I don't believe everybody's paid the same. What I believe in fair rules, that everybody has the same chance.
So does Bitcoin give us that fairness?
Yes.
And how does it do that?
It does that because it takes the power out of central banks to be able to control currency. When you're manipulating money at the base layer, you're manipulating time and information. So money is just an exchange of our time,
Mm-hmm.
and money is just information.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have misinformation of money, then you can expect misinformation everywhere else. And people are confused. This conversation is probably bringing into light for a lot of people something that they're very, very confused about because they never thought money was being manipulated at the rate it's being manipulated. And so you can expect that manipulation to be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because our time is being manipulated as a result. What Bitcoin does is forever. It's 21 million, 21 million forever, and it can't be changed.
Yeah.
And so if you have scarcity in money with technology, if you have scarcity in money, you'll have abundance everywhere else. Mm-hmm. If you have abundance in money, you'll have scarcity everywhere else.
Mm-hmm. How does that 21 million for people who are just hearing about Bitcoin or just new to you and new to me, new to Breaking into the Future? Okay, how do you spread 21 million of something, which is Bitcoin, programmable money, internet money for newbies? Like, how does that even work, and how does that create a button?
So it's divisible by 8 decimal points. So by 100 million. Each Bitcoin is divisible by 100 million. Mm-hmm. So when we think you don't need to have a Bitcoin. You could have parts of a Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And be just fine. You could invest $1 in Bitcoin. You could invest $10 in Bitcoin, and so you can use it as a savings plan over time. And that's actually what I would encourage people to do. Again, do your own work on it. Make sure you understand it and everything else. But that's I would encourage people to look at it that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I was on a conversation recently yesterday, and talking about the volatility of it, which you just talked about. But how do you get people over that fear of, okay, I can invest one millionth of a Bitcoin, I can have a Satoshi, right? How do I get over that volatility of my savings going up and down, right? Potentially crashing and coming back up. For people that that just want to save, they don't know the super fundamental reasons of why Bitcoin, but they're trying to just get in to save their money or a potential store of value.
I would rather have something that is upwardly volatile and potentially an asymmetric bet upwardly volatile than something I know is losing value. And if you're sitting on cash, it's losing value, and it's losing an enormous amount of purchasing power every year. So if given a choice, I can't for the life of me understand why you'd hold sitting on losing value, guaranteed to lose value. In fact, governments are saying that specifically. Yeah. We need we're driving interest rates lower and lower and lower. So you make no yield on your money, and we're printing money to make our dollar worth less. So inflation is losing your savings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bitcoin presumably is the new savings.
So that's what I believe. But because we're also early into a network advantage, Bitcoin, and this might be hard for people to understand, but I'll try to make it easier. It's like investing in TCP/IP. It's like investing in the protocol layer of the internet. So if you go back in time and what people were saying in 1995 about what value the internet would have, the internet as we know it emerged in 1989. Most of the value of the internet, it was based on a network effect, and the more people that were on it created more value for everybody on it. It kept on creating more and more value. But most of the value of the internet came on the second layer of the internet. Amazon's, Google's, everything else that essentially exploited that network effect and created massive entities on the second layer of the internet. But nobody could invest in the primary layer of the protocol. It was a secondary layer. Bitcoin is like investing on the primary layer of the internet. And so, and then Lightning, and there's a whole bunch of layer 2 applications on top of Bitcoin, is like being investing in the Amazons, Google, and the second layer of what's happening. And that ecosystem is moving so fast. But it's and actually, if you look back in time, the rate of growth of Bitcoin is actually mirroring is a little bit faster than the rate of growth of the internet. And where are we right now? In a kind of, if you compare the two, we're in 1996 of the internet. So most of
comparable,
just of the rate of growth and users on the internet, users on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that and you think about what happened, how most titans of industry, Sears, a whole bunch of companies that didn't see the internet coming and protected what was. We use Blockbuster as an example, but tons of other examples that didn't see what was to come. Because what's the most typical thing is we don't project the future, and we don't project against these exponential curves. We project our present onto the future. And so take a page out of what has already happened into the internet and everything else and project what happened going from here. And with Bitcoin, that's what you might see. You might see that type of value creation over time. So now if you're that early into an investment that you think is a savings account, but is way more than a savings account, it could create enormous wealth for your family. Will be upwardly volatile, but if you created that much, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Nice. So yeah, some people have gotten in early, 2017, 18, some crypto OGs that have gotten on this show, 2012. What would you say to people that haven't gotten in that early or don't have the funds that you might have to have as much Bitcoin? And there's only 21 million Bitcoin that ever be mined. If I only have, one millionth of a Bitcoin, like how is that really helping my wealth go up?
I just looked at this number yesterday because I'd been using 49 million, but there's 56 million millionaires in the world, and there's about 2,600 billionaires. So don't think about what you don't have or have. Think that there is no possible way that all of those people could ever own one Bitcoin, including the billionaires. Possible. Right? So we are so early in this transition. And when that money starts to realize, essentially what's happening is people today are front running that. We're in inning one. People think we're in inning. So
still in one. We're still that early.
We're that early. We're that early. The system is, so look at this conversation. I probably, and if you look at how many people are talking about the world in which we're moving into technology and being congruent with this, we're that early. Most of the money is being printed. Most people are buying houses with that levering up and everything else in the same system. We are so early in this. Now it could break loose because these feedback systems are moving. Moving in opposite directions, but we are still very early. And so I remember, now I've been fortunate enough to be in Amazon or different investments for a long time because the same thesis held on some of these companies. On a network effect that was growing at that rate, you could project what was happening next and next and next. But I remember a whole bunch of people telling me Amazon's way overvalued at $300. Sell everything. Look at the price today. And so that same thing is applicable here. But people this happens all the time in something that's that they don't buy because of the price. They think they can get lower, and then when it goes lower, they go, I knew it wasn't a good investment. So they talk themselves out of it's early, and you could expect upward volatility in something that's early.
Yeah. Wow. what, since we are so early and the adoption curve, like you said, the rate of growth is like, it literally is up and to the right.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of exposure. Even people, just normal people now they're getting into crypto trading. All the different wallets, people are getting on crypto.com and Coinbase, and even more of the decentralized exchanges like Uniswap, FTX, etc. We talked about before the call your opinions on altcoins, which is every other coin except Bitcoin, and you think Bitcoin is the standard, that Bitcoin has the best use case over every other altcoin. Can you give your thoughts on that and just help the audience like that's probably dabbling into trying to get high return off of these altcoins?
Yeah.
Like, just your thoughts on that and
So
how that embeds into the future.
so so probably I'm going to qualify what I'm going to say first from a I'm not in Bitcoin just to make money. I'm in Bitcoin for a bigger reason, and we've already talked about that bigger reason. I think it's the only chance that we can transition between systems. So, but if I were in it just for money, I would still choose just Bitcoin. And because what you find in technology companies that kind of go up against an incumbent is you have to have something that delivers 10 times better value to be able to have a chance for success. And so if I looked at what Bitcoin did over gold, right? So if you think about Netflix and Blockbuster, 10 times more better, and then it scales back on it to itself. It gives an audit. And so Bitcoin as a store of value, not as a medium of exchange, was a 10x improvement over gold. In the past, we had our monetary systems tied to gold, but because gold had to be centralized, people could take it and change the rules. So we could never get on planes with all our gold bars in our and Bitcoin changes that. It the velocity of money, it clears every 10 minutes, and so out of technology, you don't have to have a whole bunch of slack in your system. Out of technology, you can trade the same dollar over and over and over again. It can always clear, and people can know who owns what. So there's a whole bunch of things in Bitcoin that, to me, that give it a 10 times value over gold as a store of value. Now, as that was happening and Bitcoin was competing for store of value with gold and other things and money and everything else, and still happening today, other altcoins tried to provide a different type of use case, because if you tried to create a store of value, you have to have a 10 times better outcome than Bitcoin for that. And it seemed pretty clear that more and more people were racing towards Bitcoin, and so that use case was already that store of value. So Ethereum and others kind of built on, I'm going to be the world's supercomputer of apps and everything else, and a whole bunch of fees and different types of altcoins to be able to do this. And for a time, Ethereum still runs most of the NFT world, and so it's growing fast as a result. But what's happening now on the store of value on Bitcoin is layer 2, which is Lightning Network and others which remove the need for other altcoins to provide a function that Bitcoin doesn't, either as a medium of exchange in a currency, because Bitcoin is optimized for security, meaning it's slow in transaction speed. So you could optimize for non-security or centralize and be faster in transaction speed, but you sacrifice security. So proof of work and everything else is actually probably the thing that's optimizes for security. But layer 2, built to layer 1, handles speed of transaction and everything else. And that ecosystem is moving so fast that I can't imagine the use case for a whole bunch of other altcoins. I just don't know what it is. I haven't seen one that I'd say this provides a 10x advantage of something that is stable for long-term returns that will build essentially a network effect where every new user builds more value into the network. But I can see that on both Bitcoin and Lightning tied to it.
So you don't see that in Ethereum.
I don't see it in Ethereum. And you can see, if you just look back in time, how many times Ethereum has had effectively central planning change the rules, right? We have a committee that's just decided to change the rules, and now it's a use case. I still don't see it.
Yeah. So
I could be wrong. So in this, I could be wrong, but I don't see. I see, and gambling on sometimes a whole bunch of mining stocks can make a whole bunch of money without actually finding gold. Right, back in the day.
Yeah.
So gambling on some of these altcoins, which people do all the time. I'm not saying that there isn't this type of return there, but on that's not something I'm interested in at all, because it doesn't have a foundational level value that I believe in. That is that I can almost set and forget it unless the thesis has changed. And because if I'm having to play the stock like that, then I might as well go to Vegas.
Yeah, interesting. So, well, do you think, so you're basically, as of today, that we only need Bitcoin to fix the true systemic problems that we have, because it is all the principles we talked about, it's 10x better than our previous standard of backing, better than the dollar, gold. Will we not just have a store of value, but will Bitcoin be what the initial intent, like a peer-to-peer transaction? So like
not on layer 1, but on layer 2 it will be.
Okay. So
because
layer 2 for the audience.
So yes, so layer 2 is what El Salvador just, we're going to use this as a medium of exchange, and you can clear instantly on layer 2, and it can roll up into the blocks every 10 minutes on layer 1. So it provides way faster transaction time. It can be used as a medium of exchange. In fact, if I looked at my base case for El Salvador taking Bitcoin on layer 2, I would have said we're at least 3 years away from a country doing that as a currency. What did I miss? What I missed is the same thing that people miss, of that 10x return. I the 10x advantage. I missed, kind of from my privileged area, seeing that even something that had so much volatility, I didn't think it'd be used as a currency this early because it had so much volatility. But if you're in El Salvador and 70% of the population is unbanked and they have rampant crime and everything else, and you you can't fix that problem without technology, then Bitcoin layer 2, even with the volatility, provides 10x value to society. So now imagine without the volatility what it does. And so I see this whole thing accelerating. And now you have two different networks reinforcing each other. You have a store of value network is becoming more and more powerful all the time, and you have a medium of exchange network and a whole bunch of other services being built on Lightning tied to the store of value network that reinforce each other.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So you have El Salvador took the first leap of faith through this conviction, through these conversations that are happening with Lightning Network, and they're making their infrastructure build to make that happen. You see Paraguay and some other Latin countries, and countries that are more third world, more developing nations that, like you said, they don't have the privilege of Canada, the US, even though we have unbanked and underbanked citizens as well, right? As a very nation, we're under this Hunger Games of the current monetary system, central banking complex, Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, right? Africa, Southeast Asia, they're primed and they're ripe for this new use case. So do you see it as Bitcoin in these other countries they get more comfortable with this and they start adopting it over this next decade, like it just starts boom, boom.
It's gonna accelerate. It's again because each new country that's doing it, not just country, each person joining the network is creating more value for every other net person on the network.
Mm-hmm.
Every company that's doing it is the same. Now countries, and it's bringing more and more both innovation and security and everything else to the space.
Yeah.
I think it's unstoppable. Yeah. And that's how early we are, because Nigeria hasn't used it yet. They're using it peer to peer, but it's not been interact. But if you look at these countries and actually what's happening on the ground, people are using it in a peer to peer network already, and it's growing really fast.
Yeah. So they say stack your stats, which stack your satoshis.
Yeah,
and it's happening across the world, which is so cool. So, okay, right? You have these two things splitting apart, right? The decentralization and centralization, the central banks, right? These governments. You see the regulation. You see Elizabeth Warren talk about the super shadowy coders, right? And not really understanding what's going on. And the CBDC, which is central bank digital currencies. What do you think about central bank digital currencies? Like, is that going against Bitcoin and even these stable coins? What is this drama with like the opposing forces? And
so I wrote a piece that I encourage everybody that's listening to this go read, because it explains what's going to happen next on central bank digital currencies and everything else. It's called The Greatest Game. And if you just looked up on Google or Medium, you'll find The Greatest Game. But it walks through. You could put it in the show notes too, but it walks through what happens next here from central bank digital currencies and why they will come, and what it means, and why Bitcoin is really needed to avoid that fate. We've talked about some of why that's a really terrible thing for society, but why Bitcoin and that decentralization matters a lot. And so now, if I talked about altcoins a bit and why this matters and everything else, but if I think about altcoins in a different way, anything that confuses people about why this innovation is so important to them, I'm against.
Yeah.
Because what it's confusing people for is essentially, and this is probably worth saying, you wouldn't believe how many people ask me to create my own altcoin with a group of people, because everybody would follow me and I could get it really rich.
Yeah.
And so when I think about a bunch of altcoins and the centralization of that happening because of people wanting to drive more value to them, not society, so that's why and the confusion that builds with people getting rich sooner, but it kind of a pyramid scheme that kind of flame out and then they die and everything else, because they're centrally controlled typically. It gives me more reason to say only Bitcoin, because I worry about the harm done to so many people and them missing perhaps the thing that's so important for them because of chasing something that's a short term. And it's confusing. Like, this whole space is so confusing. Yeah. Because there's so much noise in these altcoins, and some of them go up really fast and then they collapse really fast too. So that would be the third reason why, for me, it's just Bitcoin.
Yeah. So in terms of like, it made me think about DeFi, which is decentralized finance. You're just saying, okay, like centralized finance is like the current system, right? Finance institutions like the big four banks, the investment banks, these large funds. Do you see DeFi and DeFi products, decentralized finance like Uniswap and these other market making platforms as real solutions to finance, or is it just it won't get the traction long term?
I think there could be. I'm not close enough to the space to say on every single company. So it's really hard to make a sweeping comment like that.
Yeah.
What I'd say the majority of the time, if you fix the system, a lot of the negative externalities will go away. I'll give it as a different example. We measure kind of the power of government over our daily lives, and it's increasing and increasing, and more regulation, more everything else. And people are like, they're lockdowns, everything else, and they're fighting like, what happened to the America we knew and everything else. And they're fighting with each other over these things, which is a derivative of a system that must continue to gain more power, must hire more in government, much. Let's see, that power is coming from your individual rights and freedoms. It's taking it away from you, and it must get worse on the existing system. But but there's a whole bunch of people in Bitcoin that are so worried about privacy and everything else. I care about privacy too, but so worried that they're trying to create alternative coins that are just private coins, like just super private and everything
like
else.
Monero.
Yeah, exactly, and everything else, and so they're and that confuses people about why that's so important. And here's what's happening: people don't realize that privacy wouldn't be required in the same fashion if government got way smaller and got in check to what the economy looked like. Privacy only matters because what's happening is government's becoming control of everything, and then big brother and everything, and it's going to get worse, and then privacy matters a lot. If you fix a systemic problem by having a free, allowing the natural forces of markets to work and fixing price signals with Bitcoin, most of the other problems go away.
Wow. So Bitcoin, once it circulates to these other governments, we're going to read The Greatest Game and figure out hey, what happens over this next 1 or 2 decades? Okay, let's just play hypothetical. Say Bitcoin defeats, quote unquote, air quotes for the podcast listeners, defeats the central banks, and the people have more power. That's essentially either it's we the people, which is the U.S. like preamble, our constitution, whatever you call it, versus like we the government. Top down, trickle down, we tell you what to do. We kind of have this authoritarian, totalitarian control over you, authoritarian model, but you kind of seem free because it's the West. We say we get to that point. What does government look like in that setting?
So that's an important thing. What it would force government to do is compete for us. It would look like a true democracy. I said this on a podcast this morning. I want a firefighter in my community, and I'm happy to pay taxes for a firefighter in my community. I don't want to live in a community where I have everything and 99% of the people are starving on the streets. I would vote with my time and taxes and money to make that not happen. What I don't want is somebody lying to me and saying, oh, look over here, we're charging this in taxes, but we're actually hiding most of our revenue in inflation that hurts all of these other people. I want truth. I want honesty. I want integrity. And so what Bitcoin allows is integrity because the system demands it. Integrity sits on top of it. Because what a government would have to do, what a politician would have to do is instead of hiding their spending in a parlor trick that hurts a whole bunch of society, they'd have to be honest with citizens, and we would vote for it. And more so, if you take that to its logical conclusion, because you could get on a plane anywhere with your Bitcoin, and if you remember 12 words, nobody can stop you from moving anywhere. Governments will compete for talent and capital the same way they compete for talent and capital today. It'll just be on a just system. So I'm traveling next year around the world, and El Salvador wasn't on my list. It's on my list now. Yeah. And so I'll be spending money in El Salvador because of a change in systems that brings more individual rights and freedoms, and in the innovation economy that moves to countries that are early into this will attract capital and talent. Just like, by the way, your example out of the US is a really prescient example. What created the US as a superpower was trying to getting out of Europe and starting with hard money and Declaration of Independence Constitution that protected individual rights and freedoms, and that's what actually created the things we take for granted now, like Ford and electricity and a whole bunch of things that then were taken around the globe that created America as a superpower, and it's crazy that by the way, I do believe that the U.S. is probably the most likely to, out of the G7, to go earlier than others on, or at least in certain states, or at least regulate so Bitcoin becomes part of the system. But for most countries, the advantage goes to the early, and the advantage goes to the people that are most hurt by the existing system, like El Salvador. Just like in a business. Many people wouldn't know this, but in my original business, Bill Direct, we Yahoo and Google, right? So Yahoo, we had to spend $5,000 a month in advertising to be able to be shown on their complicated page.
Yeah.
In Google, it was free. We just built to their search algorithm, and it was completely free. So it tells you how fast a market making, and that's what I'm getting. It's a 10x advantage because all the businesses built to there, and which business is built first? The businesses that built to Google first were the businesses most unable to pay high advertising at TV.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is applying in what we're talking about in Bitcoin, which countries, which citizens, which will build there first, the ones that are most disadvantaged by the existing system.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, what is the future for countries that don't switch over to the new system?
Eventually their populations will demand it, I think, but they're going to be left out of. They're going to be behind the curve on innovation, and again, if enough countries start joining this, it happens really fast, and the innovation. So the have-nots become the haves.
Wow. I guess is the goal for everybody to become a have on various levels.
Exactly.
And Bitcoin has the potential to do that, or it will do it.
I'm a probability person. I can never say will. But I think it has. I am hopeful that it will, and I think it has a strong possibility to do that.
Nice. And what if it didn't? Could it be stopped? Can Bitcoin be stopped?
So how would you stop it? And I've spent a bunch of time on this too. And it's actually another reason potentially against altcoins is if I was a central planner and if I could coordinate control of a network, of an altcoin network, to be able to leverage that, to be able to own more of that network, so that I could impose my will, kind of control over society at a later date, then I would think about using the same economics that drive Bitcoin, kind of that upward volatility, to drive another altcoin that I could drive control over, to make popular, so people could do that. I'd do that at the same time as I was launching kind of misinformation campaigns around Bitcoin, whether it was energy, whether it was Bitcoin is bad for the planet, like you see today, or I would attack my own grid. I would attack my own electricity grid and shut down electricity, and like in a CIA movie, and then do a ransomware for Bitcoin. And so I try to make people discount it while I tried to build another system that could compete with it. That's what but even with all those things that I think actually are happening in some sort of fashion or not, I don't know if they're as coordinated as some people might believe in conspiracy theories, but they are happening. don't think it's stoppable at this point.
It's too decentralized, right?
It's too decentralized. You can't stop it. It just keeps on. It searches for lower cost energy. China just tried to shut down the entire all the hashing power, and it works like clockwork.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, difficulty algorithm adjusts and everything's fine.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you've been really blessed to, your book and your prior achievements and success, and just like we said before, like having a whole life, not just one area of happiness, and the rest of your life is crap.
Yeah.
What is like your vision for your life and your family, and like for the world? As you said, you're doing this for bigger things than you.
So I'm doing it, and what I've said this on a couple of podcasts, but not many. Most people don't realize that even though I wrote about it, I think people gloss over that part in the book. I walked away from my business that at one time my own personal wealth in that business was over 100 million, and I walked away with zero after having sold my house and to be able to fund the business. And when you walk away with zero and you're renting a house, and you can't pay for rent at the end of the month, and you don't know how you're going to live, and you have to come home and tell your family it's all gone, but you still have your integrity. It takes you, like, it was a wild experience, and I was blessed by how many people in my network came to me, helped, like just what it really means. So it wasn't about money, but you actually have to contemplate, what do I have at nothing? What do I have at zero? What do I have at nothing? And when I contemplated what I have at nothing, zero, like, no money, my life was pretty wealthy. It was pretty awesome. And so I realized I still have all the knowledge I gained through the whole thing. Money's easy if you have the knowledge, the curiosity, and everything else. And so it could rebuild wealth easily. But way more important, I had everything at nothing. And so it just kind of afforded me a peace, relationships, friends, everything else, family, everything. And how fast you can build back wealth it's been crazy.
Yeah.
But going through that was so I want for nothing. For me, there's nothing I need. There's nothing more I want. I do what I want to do each day. Love my life. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Sweet. We got to get on your level. What piece of advice do you have for the break-in gang? That's what I call it. The break-in crew. What piece of advice do you have? And then one question for me. Sometimes I do that randomly.
Okay. So we started with that biggest thing. If I could say the one thing in your life that'll change everything is, if you see something that you don't like, that it keeps happening to you,
yeah,
it's most likely you, and it's not the world conspiring against you. It's you. And if you can look inside that level and force that, and that could be your relationship with somebody else, it could be with partner, it could be kids, it could be everything else. But if you take accountability for every single thing else in your life, and you look at that, it'll drive a curiosity to be able to fix it. If you don't need to fix it. I'm not saying it couldn't be somebody else in your life, but you choose all the people in your life.
Yeah.
So if you choosing them, then it's you too. And so that accountability is, which is hard to do because it's not normal. It's easier to not believe that, is a really big driver of change.
Yeah. Man, there you go. Awesome. That's awesome. Sweet. Man, you don't have to ask me a question. That was great.
Well, okay. I do want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Why do you do this? Why the podcast? What is it for you?
Yeah. That's an amazing question, but I have an answer. So the podcast Break Into the Future was, like we said before the show, is when I was breaking into crypto and being a tech founder myself, our company don't have a potential net worth of 100 million yet. Um, I've had my own journeys in the last 5.5 years. Was just realizing that there weren't a lot of people like me in the space, and tech as well, and banking as well, hedge fund space as well. Not a lot of Black people, and I've been blessed to live around a lot of different cultures and different types of people, and just realizing that it was about the 99%. Regardless of your race or where you're from, to hear about, to hear Jeff Booth, a guy that I look up to and read his book, to get that book in people's hands and hear Jeff Foss rave about his trading experiences and talk about Bitcoin, and, Nitin Gar talk about, his leading IBM blockchain experience, and just different people nerd out and have these cool conversations, and not just in Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto, but what about, electric vehicles, and hey, let's get Elon on, and just like get people like, dang, Joshua's Black, but he's talking to all these people. How does he do it? And I could just be one of the many awesome, talented people of color that could spread that. And I never was a person that was super like Black rights, Black Lives Matter, and all that stuff. Because of how I grew up, and I was always proud of I was Black. But I think really now it's like, how do I show that to my people, but also show that it doesn't matter where Jeff is from, where Josh was from, like we're really one and the same.
I love that.
So, yeah, really that. And then just, I really want to show the world how all of us could live a limitless life. Like you said, like, how can you do what you want? How, like, the fundamentals of like how our world has gone. I think the great thing about the next wave of the internet is like the internet of value, right?
Totally.
Like, these former platforms and these things that we create have actually become to extract value instead of create. And so we could use these platforms, but we get nothing out of it. If they shut me down, I don't get all my stuff is theirs, right? They own the intellectual property of it. And I think everything we know today will not be the same.
Yeah.
Except for the intangibles, right? Like you said, your integrity, the way we live, and even in the blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto space, how, man, I'm just meeting people in India. My Canada network is like growing by the day. And everyone's so friendly there, but it's just like, man, this is what it's about, right? We're all coming together, hopefully for something bigger than ourselves. And as you shown over and over again, right? Just reaching out to me, right? I don't have a big following yet, but you do this all the time. And so I just appreciate people like yourself. And so just showing that love.
But you just did what we talked about before. You took accountability. You changed this. You're impacting a whole bunch of other people by being kind of the person you want to see around. Mm-hmm. And by the way, and it attracts other people. That's what attracts me. It attracts Greg Foss. He tells me everything else, and so it's a total pleasure to be able to do this with you. But again, you put up your hand to do it, and congrats.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely. This was awesome. Definitely got to come back again. Maybe when winter really starts.
Yeah, I know.
we can give an update. But really a pleasure, Jeff. This is awesome, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. Great chatting.
All right. Peace.
See ya.
Man, hold up. Wait a minute. Greg, Jeff Booth, not Greg Foss. Thank you, Greg, for the intro. Man, gonna leave notes below about how to follow him. You could just look up Jeff Booth on Twitter. He is pretty popular on there. His book, The Price of Tomorrow, look him up. I'm gonna post his writing on the master game. And so going to post that in the chat as well. It's on Medium, I believe. Man, a lot of things went into that. Definitely watch this. Definitely share this. We need this to be 100,000, but definitely subscribe to Breaking in the Future. Why? Because we are breaking nation, breaking gang, whatever you want to call it. We are breaking to the future, all things future, crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, electric vehicles, psychedelics, cannabis, solar. The future is here. It's now. and we're blasting off. Come with me. Let's get it. I love you guys.